Welcome back to the Spectrum podcast of TG right here with all of you today. Brought to you by the OHIO podcast. What we're going to be talking about is the aftermath of the national championship and what it means for college football, especially the comparisons between the Big Ten and the SEC. And we're going to cover a lot of NFL news today as well because there's been some big news that has dropped between the two. So let's start, shall we? First, let's start with the national title game. The national title game between Miami and Indiana was pretty much a defensive national championship game. It was boring to start, but got exciting as the game went on. Got to give it that. In Indiana, which is still almost unbelievable to say, won the national championship. And it really was something. Like, I'm happy for Indiana fans, to be quite honest. I know for a fact how much Chris hates Indiana's fans, but it's like, if my question, here's my thing. I get that the Indiana fans have acted arrogant. I get that the Indiana fans have been a pain in the butt to listen to, but they're not worse than Michigan fans or Miami fans. Miami fans for sure are the worst. So I'd rather Indiana win than Miami because I would not want to hear from Miami's fan base whatsoever. But I do think this does start raising questions about the Big Ten as regarding college football in general, because this is the third year with an asterisk because 2020 because we all know the reason why, but this is the third year the Big Ten has won the national championship in a row. The third year in a row the Big Ten has won the natty. Again, there's an asterisk because 2023 Michigan's title, huge asterisk. We all know the reason why. Ohio State in 2024, now Indiana in 2025. This begs the question in all of college football: what does it take to win a national championship? Right? This begs the question between the SEC, between the Big Ten. You can even include the Big 12 and the ACC if you want to in this conversation as well, because one of the things that has never been discussed and watching the national title game these past 3 years, the Big Ten has won a natty, again with an asterisk for one. When you look at Indiana and Ohio State's national titles of 2024 and 2025 specifically, I think what makes the biggest difference, and what has been the biggest difference, I would say, between the Big Ten and every other conference is the coaching. Why do I say that? It's always been the difference between the Big Ten and every other conference, because the truth is, everybody, that the Big Ten could not rely on out recruiting everybody. Everybody but Ohio State, except Ohio State didn't even rely on out recruiting everyone because they knew that would be futile anyway. But these coaches, the teams in the Big Ten knew, the coaches specifically knew they had to develop if they wanted to get far in the coaching world. That's where I think the biggest difference is between the Big Ten and every other team there is in college football, except for like a few. The Big Ten conference, the coaches specifically value development. Because when I look at this, and this is kind of why I think it's even good for a team like Ohio State to have this, and good for Indiana, good for the entire Big Ten, is you have coaches that value development above all else. This is why the Big Ten is the better conference now, even through the NIL portal, because the reality is these Big Ten coaches will not rely on recruiting because they know it's not, I mean, yeah, you still gonna have to recruit, but it's not the greatest strength. Like, you're gonna have to recruit your roster as well just to keep them out of the portal, especially with the transfer portal rules, which we could go on for days about this one. We can go on for days about the transporter rules. But with NIL and transporter, these coaches know, like, we can't rely on these kids to stay here. Like, we have to develop players in order to stay afloat, and we have to make good in the transfer portal as well. Like, because recruiting high schoolers, like, yeah, we still will recruit, still will establish something, but recruiting them is kind of futile. Like, we have to recruit the developmental guys and just go on the portal for guys that we must want. What I mean by that is it's kind of like in the grand final of how Vader and Eric explained Ohio State's plan, where they're going to go after the 5 stars and put their money on those guys for the most part. At least, what was it, 10, 12, I think, maybe. Then they're going to put that money into the portal regarding transfer portal guys who are already proven to be in that middle eight, to be that second string. And they're going to go down to the bottom and get guys who are developmental to develop. So that way, by the time they hit the field, they'll be ready because they got no motive to leave. Because they're not going to leave. Like, they're going to trust in the system, which, again, for Ohio State, in that regard, is the smart thing. Because if you're Ohio State, you can't rely on out recruiting everybody. And you should already know this. Like, the thing that drove Ohio State to success was their continuous development. Because even when they got 5 stars, they still developed these 5 stars into something completely different. They developed these guys. It's the same strategy I think teams in the Big Ten are using, where they're going to value development over recruiting. Because it's like, we can recruit as many 5 stars as we want, but if these guys aren't developing and if these guys don't really fit the mold of what we want, then we're gonna have to rely on developing the guys we have on our roster right now. That's what we have to do. That's what we have to develop or depend on, which is complete and utter development. And you're seeing that with how many teams are hiring coaches that are all about development. Because when I look at the SEC, for example, the reason why the SEC is not as dominant as they once were is because now you're in an era where you can't just rely on recruiting. Like, it's actually showing that SEC coaches might not be as good as people thought they were. Like, yeah, Nick Saban, I mean, he was a Big Ten coach. That man was all about development. Same with Urban Meyer, for that matter of fact. Like, those two right there were all about development. It wasn't just recruiting. Development was key too, because you could have all the 5 stars you want in the world, but if you're not developing those guys, it's not going to matter. So those two, yes, they were all about development. But they also came from the Big Ten. People tend to forget this, but Nick Saban and Urban Meyer both coached at Ohio State as assistant coaches. Urban as a receiver coach, Nick's at Saban as a defensive backs coach. People do tend to forget that they both coached here at Ohio State. They were part of the same coaching staff with Tressel and with Pete Carroll. They know that development is key because they spent their time here at Ohio State knowing that, especially from Woody Hayes. They started with Woody Hayes, ended up with, got to Earl Bruce. They were part of Earl Bruce's coaching staff, no doubt. And they knew that even during those two different coaching eras of Ohio State, of Woody Hayes and Earl Bruce, they know that development was key because this is what they were taught. And they took that over to the SEC. Now, Urban, of course, eventually came back to the Big Ten, as we all know. Saban stayed in the SEC, but he was the only coach that you could look at in the SEC and say he knew how to develop talent. Every other coach in the SEC just banked on getting talent. That's just the reality. Every team in the SEC banked on just out recruiting everybody and getting the best talent, even paying these guys to come here and help them. But then when NIL, and this is something that even they should have thought about, what happens if that becomes legal? Because it was eventually going to become legal, whether the NCAA liked it or not. It was eventually going to become legal because the court wasn't going to have it. Like, you're not going to ask these kids to come out here, put their bodies and souls and lives on the line, and you're not giving them any compensation for this. Like, you are going to have to pay these guys regardless, which I'm not against, but there needs to be rules and regulations. No if, no ands, or buts. But that was going to happen regardless. So the letter of the law becomes, for the SEC, if the big if paying players become legal, and even the transfer portal becomes like, and we've seen what the transfer portal was, because now you can't just have a penalty, that even though I do think there should be penalties, because you get one free transfer, but then after the fact you get penalties for transferring. Seriously, more than once. There needs to be a significant line of penalties for that. But if that ever did happen, what are we going to do to separate ourselves to continue our dominance? That's something the SEC didn't think about. And now that it's happened, and when you look at the Big Ten, you're seeing exactly what the difference between these two conferences is. Because now the SEC, you can't just rely on out talenting everybody. You can't just rely on getting talent. Like, you're gonna have to recruit these guys to stay here. But more importantly, you got to be able to develop the guys that are already on your roster. And from what I'm seeing thus far of the SEC, I don't know what coaches you have that are capable of that. Outside of Alex Golish, the Auburn head coach, the new Auburn head coach. Like, when Auburn hired him, I thought that was a great hire because this is a guy who's all about development. He is an Ohio State alum. He graduated from Ohio State, so like that's a Big Ten guy who's coming to the SEC to help develop Auburn's players. Because it's like for Auburn and Texas A&M, like for the SEC, this is a lesson realistically. What you see from Indiana. Even what you saw from Ohio State in 2024, yeah, they had more talent, but they still developed. And look at Ohio State's talent in the NFL. Those guys are killing it right now. Everybody called Ohio State's like the NFL this year, the Ohio State Alumni Showcase. Why? Because every player from Ohio State was showing out in the NFL, especially the guys from the 2024 national title team. Those guys were showing out. Marvin Harrison Jr. was showing out. CJ Stroud was showing out. J.K. Dobbins. uh Terry McLaurin, when he's healthy, at least, because he wasn't healthy much this year, but when he was healthy, man, that man was showing out as always. The Bosas, typically, and countless other players at Ohio State, like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Zach Harrison, Jordan Fuller, and a couple other Buckeyes, a lot of other Buckeyes in the NFL that are still there. They've been showing out this year. I mean, as the Buckeyes always tend to do. That's not surprising to me that that is the case, because Ohio State is all about development. And again, Ohio State was called 3-star U for their ability to develop wide receivers. That's actually what Alabama was called under Nick Saban, because Nick Saban did the same thing. When you look at the Florida Gators under Urban, they were a great, well-developed team. Not only did they get great and elite players, but they also got lower tier guys, like guys who weren't really high up in the margins, and developed those guys into something. Now we all know Urban's tenure ended ugly in Florida, but the development was still a thing there. And when you look at Florida now, since Urban left, they have been stuck in the rut. They could not find a coach that did what Urban did, which was being able to develop players and turn them into NFL guys on a consistent basis. They've yet to find that. What the SEC is starting to learn, especially because, like I said, I already brought it up. Auburn and Texas A&M, two teams who've had elite, who have had top 10, top 5, top 3 classes. Mostly Texas A&M. Texas A&M had the greatest recruiting class of all time. They still sucked. People, watching Indiana win the Natty, and they don't even have a top, I don't even think they have a top 20 recruiting class or even a top 30. Like, they don't have a top tier recruiting class, and they still won the Natty. And we can't even just say it's because of transporter guys, to be quite honest. Like, they developed some players who are still on that roster. Like, yeah, you got a couple of guys from the portal, but it's not all guys from the portal. You still got some guys on that team that were developed, that were there from the beginning. And honestly, a lot of these guys were people um who followed Kirk Cignetti from James Madison. Kirk Cignetti is the example of a coach that took players, developed them, and turned them into something great. And I know that this is going to be an exciting time for the Big Ten, because that's where the coaching advantage is. The coaching advantage is in the Big Ten, unlike every other conference. Like, you got some teams that got some good coaches. Like, for instance, I think Duke, they got a great coach with Manny Diaz, regardless of what people want to say. They do. They got a good coach with him. He's not gonna rely on out recruiting people. He's just gonna he's gonna recruit, but he's gonna develop. He is. He is. He's going to develop players that he gets. He's not relying on just out recruiting guys. Like he's going to develop players. That's just who he is. Nothing more, nothing less. Like you're not gonna rely on keeping these guys out of the portal. Like there are times these guys are gonna leave. It's gonna happen a lot, really. Sorry, guys, just adjusting my mic here. But that's just the truth of it. Because when I look at what Indiana did, and again, their fans are gonna be insurmountable. Yes, they can be annoying now that they finally got good. But here's the reality: it really shows how much of a coaching advantage there is in the Big Ten. And again, you're seeing teams starting to hire, like for instance, UCLA. I forget the name of the coach they hired. I know who they hired, but the coach that they hired is a great at development. He's great at identifying talent and developing talent. I look at Northwestern and what David Braun has done since he's been there, and look, David Braun. I mean, I'm impressed with what this man has done, and he just hired Chip Kelly to be his offensive coordinator, which I think is a great move on his part because Chip Kelly is a mastermind as far as offense. That man's a mastermind. There ain't no if, no ands, no buts about it. That man is a mastermind as a as an offensive minded genius. If we're being honest, a mad scientist. He's pretty much like what I would say about Matt Patricia on offense. Like Matt Patricia is the Albert Einstein of defense. I would say Chip Kelly, and you can see it from how NFL teams have been using his schemes in the NFL and how easily it translates and how easily it works. He's literally the Albert Einstein of offense. I mean, friggin' even Urban Meyer and Nick Saban wanted to learn from him about his offenses. Like they wanted to learn a lot about his offenses. They were gonna do everything they can to try to replicate that man's offense because of how good it was, how effective it was, and rightfully so. That man was a genius. But that's just the reality. Because when I look at the Big Ten right now, I look at the SEC. I look at the Big 12 and the SEC. I mean, I'm not the SEC, the ACC. I meant because I already said them. When you're looking at it, there are few teams that have great coaches from the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC. You got teams who's got some coaches who are capable of development, for sure. Not all your teams, though. That's where your issue is. Majority of it is in the Big Ten. Like, for instance, I expect Kirk Ferentz at some point to retire. Iowa is going to be looking for someone who can develop like Kirk Ferentz can. That's what I expect. I expect them to go after someone who's all about development. Like I said, with Auburn, you got a guy who's a Big Ten guy who knows all about development. So, like, this should help you, if anything. This should help you become a good team because of the development aspect. Who else in the SEC I think could be good from a developmental standpoint? I could say Lane Kiffin. That may be hard for a lot of people to hear, but out of all the other SEC coaches, him and Golish might be the best developers. Third, I would say would be the Vanderbilt coach. Which what does that tell you? And this is me. And again, this is not me crapping on some of the other SEC teams. Like Kirby Smart, I think is an excellent coach. But you're starting to see what you're starting to see out of the SEC, including like Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart, and a lot of them. It's like you kind of seeing that, like, okay, unless they have a rigmy of talent, their teams are not that great. They're not that all that. They're really beatable. Because development is a problem at both these schools, if we're being honest, especially with Georgia when it comes to their wide receivers, because their wide receivers have a problem catching for whatever the reason. Their defense has been the same. That is for sure. Their defense has been honestly, they've fallen far from grace, to be honest. They've been pretty they're still good, still up there in that upper elite, but they're not the defense they used to be. They're not developing tight ends like they used to. Like, man, I remember Kirby Smart's first set of years. They were developing tight ends like crazy. Now they're not doing that no more. So I would say that with the Big Ten, I think you can look forward to seeing from what we've seen from Indiana, what I think we will see from every team, maybe Michigan as well. But from what I understand, Kyle Whittingham is not the same Kyle Whittingham he used to be. So it's like, we'll see if he can get them from a developmental standpoint. But I don't know if he, I'm going to say, I don't think he can. Because with Bryce Underwood, he wants to be a passing quarterback. But being with Kyle Whittingham's offense is not going to allow him to grow as a passer. Same with the wide receivers, for that matter of fact. So we're going to see how it plays out of Michigan. But, you know, we'll see. But I will say that the Big Ten has developmental aspects. They've always had the better developmental coaches. Those coaches could just never get their hands on talent. That was just the problem. They couldn't out recruit everybody. That was the problem. They didn't bank on that. I mean, I look at Michigan State when they hired Pat Fitzgerald. I think that was the best hire Michigan State has made since Mark D'Antonio. Because he was a great developmental coach. He coached here at Ohio State. Again, he knows what development means. And like when they got him, that was the best hire they made. You hiring Pat Fitzgerald was the second best hire since the Mark D'Antoni hire. Because like D'Antoni, he's all about development. Development is key for you to win games. And how you can become a problem even for teams like an Ohio State that we've seen where Ohio State may have had more talent, but these coaches developed their players into becoming a problem where Ohio State couldn't just think they were going to walk in and beat them easily. Like, no, you had to take these teams seriously. And that's kind of what it is, I think, in the Big Ten. As well as the fact that, we're seeing the SEC trying to go to 9 conference games, right? Like, this is going to be a thing now. They're going to go to 9 conference games with the Big Ten because they're seeing how well it works for the Big Ten. Now, why does that work well for the Big Ten? Well, the reason why it works well is because for the Big Ten, especially with the capacity in which they do the Big Ten championship game now, this formula that they have in their conference allows them to weed out the playoff pretenders and the playoff contenders. It allows them to tell the difference as who's the pretender and who is the contenders for the playoffs. Not only that, but you also are able to know which one of your teams can potentially compete for a national title. That's why for the Big Ten, and not only that, but they have depth going in. They're able to handle the deep, grinding layers of the playoffs because they play 9 conference games. And then they have their conference title game, which would actually be like the 10th game of the Big Ten conference, but the postseason sense. I kind of look at the Big Ten title game, really every conference title game, as it's a game of your conference, but it's the postseason conference game. That's what it is. The postseason conference game is how I look at. That's how I look at conference title games. The postseason conference games. These are the games. These are the postseason games of the conference. The Big Ten title games are to determine who's the best in the conference, at least as of right now. Until you go and win a natty. But that's what it is. So technically, you could say that the Big Ten has 10 conference games. And because of that, you having 9 regular season games in your conference, you have 9 regular season in-game conference games. That's what you have. And then you have the 10th game being your conference title game. And you already have, with the Big Ten, let's see here, you have 3, out of conference games? And then you have the postseason. So, like, you have a maximum of games you have to go up against. You got to go through a gauntlet most times. And you got a chance of drawing better teams and better, like, just teams that can really put you through the ringer. That's the chance that you have here in the Big Ten because it gives you that chance. It makes you prove yourself if you're worthy of being a contender for the playoffs. If you're a pretender or a contender, doesn't matter which one. It matters which one, really, in the Big Ten. And again, with the formula in which how they decide the Big Ten champion, well, It works. It works. And you see how well that's worked out for the Big Ten thus far because they got three, again, asterisks with the 2023 national title. But 24 and 25, yeah, legitimate titles. And you see how well it worked out for them, including this playoff expansion because this is more NFL like. And I feel like it favors the Big Ten more than it does the SEC because, as much as SEC fans, and they may hate me for saying this, your conference was never really NFL. Because in the NFL, it's more than just talent. Like, you have to have the coaches that can develop these guys. Because the NFL, in a lot of ways, is like college football, where development is key. And a lot of these coaches just bank on having the talent, but not developing the talent. That's where the problem kind of starts. For a lot of NFL teams, you don't have coaches like a Bill Belichick. Say whatever you want about Bill Belichick now in North Carolina. Bill Belichick's main thing is going to be development, regardless. It's what he was doing in the NFL. Like development was key in the NFL for him. Same with uh, same with the Kansas City Chiefs head coach Andy Reid. Like, development was always a thing for him. I mean, again, this guy won a Super Bowl with two crappy quarterbacks, two average to below average quarterbacks as his two normal guys as his quarterbacks, and he won a Super Bowl. And then he gets his hands on Patrick Mahomes and transforms Patrick Mahomes into a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like, as Patrick Mahomes said himself, if it wasn't for Andy Reid, there is no Patrick Mahomes. And he ain't wrong about that. I say it in the NFL all the time. It doesn't matter how much talent you have in your team. Like, if you don't have the coaching to bring these guys together, to have these guys play as one, to develop these guys into a freaking team, as to develop these players into something more, it's not going to matter how much talent you have. I mean, you look at the Detroit Lions, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Pittsburgh Steelers, really, as well, the Baltimore Ravens during that time, and a lot of other teams. It's like a couple other teams, I should say. Like, you can see why. Like, when people talk about the Bengals and the Browns, it's because, well, your coaching sucks at development, clearly. Doesn't have an identity, doesn't have a culture, doesn't have anything put in place for success. That's what you can say about a lot of teams, really. Again, when I look at the SEC, I don't see an elite football conference. Honestly, again, we talked about this. This this new era of college football where everybody can do whatever and everybody's allowed to play players in the transfer portal, like, it's more of an even playing field than people realize. Now, there's still some loopholes and some dog mess that needs to get cleaned up, because, like I said, I am all about having regulations for the transfer portal and having regulations for NIL. Like, there needs to be a salary cap on NIL. Or better yet, there needs to be a salary cap depending on how the NIL is distributed. Because here's what I do believe too. If the NIL for teams, I would use NIL like this, with name, image, or likeness. Like, the NIL collectives or foundations, whatever you want to call them, what they can do is they could be the source of paying the players. So that way it's not coming out of the university's pocket, but the NIL can be where players, the NIL foundations, like, for instance, for Ohio State, um it's the foundation. That could be the source from where you're paying these players, is where the money comes directly from. But the rest of the NIL can get distributed through business and advertisement deals, right? So, showing up for signings, doing commercials, things of the sort. Like, that's another way NIL money could come for these kids, where it doesn't have to be part of the salary cap. Like, you could have another set of NIL, such as like NIL advertisement, where these guys can get paid through advertisements, through NIL deals through advertisements, which won't affect the salary cap of the schools. It'll come directly from the businesses' pockets that do business with these very programs, with the very schools, such as your Ohio State, your Bamas, your Georgias, your Indianas, and all that of the world. That's where those NIL deals can come from, as I would call NIL advertisement deals. Traditional NIL will have a salary cap, but NIL deals regarding business, NIL advertisement deals where you can get deals through signings and through commercials and stuff of the sort, doing promotions for certain brands and products of these brands. That's a great way for these kids to make money. And this way, it also prevents them from getting taken advantage of. Because like I said, if the regulations on NIL will protect these kids from getting taken advantage of and being ruined in the long term. Because the more I look at what NIL is doing to college football, these kids are getting taken advantage of. Which I will get deeper into the NIL conversation on another show down the line. But that's what's happening with these kids, and they're gonna get ruined long term. Like in this, like short term is great that they're making money, but long term they're gonna go broke and they're gonna find themselves in a very bad place. Long term, they're gonna be hurting. I can tell you that right now. So we'll get into that on the next show. But again, back to the conversation regarding the SEC, the Big Ten, and all these other schools. It's clear, especially with the SEC, that you don't have the coaches that can develop like teams in the ACC, like teams in the Big 12, and especially like teams in the Big 10. You don't have that. You were so reliant on out recruiting everybody that you forgot the meaning of development. That's where the issue starts. So, when I pretty much look at what this Miami Indiana game has really foretold us, is that coaching matters more than anything. Honestly, it's what showed you it last year in 2024. But it definitely showed you that with Miami and Indiana, especially with Indiana. The losingest program in college football history won their first national championship ever. With a team that hadn't even been together that long. Been together long enough for the entire year, but they haven't been together that long. And a team that got beat down last year by teams that were better than them. Then they come back and they beat one of those teams at least. Kirk Cignetti just did something in his second year, which is win a national championship. And what's funny is he beat Miami. I kind of want to say this about Kirk Cignetti because it's kind of funny to me that his speech represented at Indiana with Michigan suck, Ohio State, Purdue, they suck. Like, right? These three teams suck. Very reminiscent of Trim Tressel's speech about Michigan sucks when Tressel first came in. Tressel's first year wasn't great like Cignetti's, though. Like, Cignetti actually made it to the playoffs. Jim Tressel went 7-5. Kirk Cignetti went 11-1. That's the only difference. But their second year as coaches, they go and win the Natty. And they beat the same team to do it, which I find kind of funny. Like, if you're a Miami fan and an Oregon fan, to be quite honest, like, that's kind of very reminiscent that the way Indiana beats you is very similar to how Ohio State's beaten you guys in the past. That's pretty funny similar. Now, I will say this. The difference is Ohio State has repeatedly turned out coaches, has won 3 national championships this century with 3 different head coaches. 3 different. They're the only team that can say that. No other team has even 2. Because Ohio State values coaches like a Kirk Cignetti, like a Ryan Day. Because to me, Ryan Day and Kirk Cignetti are the 2 best coaches. I think Kirby Smart's number 3. I like Kirby, but no, I don't think he's better than Ryan Day, especially where his program is heading. It's not going the great way. It's not going up. If I had to list it, I would say Ryan Day's 1 right now, and Cignetti's number 2, a very close number 2. Like, he could surpass Ryan Day if Ryan Day does not, if Ryan Day makes mistakes like what he made this far. Even though Ryan Day does fix his mistakes, like when I look at the Miami game, I want people to understand this. Like, these 2 times that Ohio State lost, it wasn't because of coaching. It was because of the execution of the players. The execution of the players. Especially of quarterback Julian Sayin, because for Sayin, he had a bunch of wide receivers open in the Indiana and Miami game. He had wide receivers that were open. He just didn't see them. So his processing really had been a problem. So I think Ryan Day is going to spend a lot of time, especially with Billy Fessler, helping Julian Sand and these players, these kids, helping Julian Sand, Tavian St. Clair, and their other QBs understand how to read a defense and understand where to go with the football. Because you have guys that are open, you're just not seeing them. But also, I think Ryan Day is going to make it a point to Tyler Bowen, buddy, you need to really step up because the offensive line last year was amazing. This year, they took a step back. So you're going to have to show me something. I think Ryan Day is going to have to be really on Tyler Bowen about that one. And again, I do have a format for that. You guys have heard me talking about it on the OHIO podcast myself multiple times. Now, obviously, there's some arguments and a lot of stuff that goes to that, but I'm gonna get into that a little later. Right? I'm gonna get onto that the next show. I'll be doing it with a guest, and I'll let you guys know by the end of it. But now that we've but I think that just needs to be known too, is that with the Big Ten, is they separate themselves from everybody else because they have a clear coaching advantage in their conference. Because the coaches value development, not just recruiting. They value development. I think Ohio State, regardless of how such, still is that way. Same with every other team. Penn State, like they just took Iowa State's head coach, who has been great with development. Like I think that was a good hire for them. Even though I thought hiring Pat Fitzgerald would have been better for them, I still think that was a good hire. What they did with Matt Campbell, that's a great hire, to be quite honest. Purdue, I think what they have with Barry Odom is a good hire. I think he's good at development, in my opinion. You got to be able to develop the talent you have, and that's what needs to happen. And trust me, Big Ten schools are starting, and Big Ten schools already do that. Brett Bielema, the guy's a great developer. Got to give him that. He's a great developer. Countless other Big Ten teams have great developers on their coaching staff. And like I said, if I'm Ohio State, I am going to keep my eyes on Cortez Hankins for Ohio State to see how he does. So far, he's doing pretty good. But I want to see how he's developing the wide receivers because I'm not going to lie. At LSU, it was kind of shaky. Now, for granted, you can't say the quarterback play wasn't helping much, which is understandable. But still, I want to see it. I want to see with all our coaches that we have. I want to continue to see development across the Saints. I want to see development, development, development. That's what I want to see. Now that we got the college football stuff out of the way, let's talk about some NFL news because there's been a bunch of NFL news that has come out that I had to hold off on because I figured I could do it all in one show. Some of the NFL news, actually, there's a lot. We already talked about how John Harbaugh had made his move to the New York Giants as a head coach for the New York Giants. It's really a good hire for the New York Giants. We'll see how it plays out on the field. But other NFL news, as I want to talk about, regard the NFL games. As a matter of fact, let me pull this up. So, I haven't done reactions on Patreon since the Panthers Rams game. I plan to do more when I have the opportunity, but you guys will just have to wait on that. Let me see here. However, trying to get some stuff set up. I want to show you guys some of the NFL games real quick. You guys might not be able to see this well because on here is not really great, but let me see if I can kind of fix this in a sense too while I'm at it. So what I'm pulling up for you guys are the NFL games because I do want you guys to see this in a lot of ways. So, all right, hold on, guys. Give me a second to try to do this correctly. Because I'm going to see it to where all of you can see it as well as me. All right, I think this should work. Yeah, this works. So, uh, from what I can tell you about these NFL games is these are the most recent NFL games. The Bills, the Broncos, the 49ers, Seahawks, Texans, Patriots, Rams, and Bears. Obviously, the previous games that we've had, uh, which were the first rounds, the wild card rounds of the NFL playoffs, all turned out to be really good games. But these games in particular, actually, why I covered them is because they led to severe consequences. The Bills lost to the Broncos by 3. The Seahawks blew out the 49ers. Not even funny. It's almost kind of sad, actually. Patriots beat the Texans and Rams. Thank God, beat the Bears. I know a lot of people be like, "Ain't you from Chicago?" I hate the Bears, particularly the general manager. I hate that fool like more than anything. Now, people may ask, why do I bring this up? Well, first, for the Seahawks and 49ers game, this game actually, Sam Darnold did not play. He got injured before the game. And the fact that the Seahawks still blew out the 49ers is saying a lot, really. It's saying a lot. But the 49ers defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh, has accepted the head coaching position of the Tennessee Titans. No, serious people. After this game, and I'm not joking when I'm saying this. After this game, Robert Saleh has accepted the Tennessee Titans head coaching position. He was supposed to take an interview with the Arizona Cardinals, but he took the Tennessee Titans head coaching job. Good for him, to be quite honest. Good for him. But that's not the only one. Because the Buffalo Bills have fired Sean McDermott. That is a big set of big. That was big. I did not expect them to fire Sean McDermott, to be quite honest. I figured that, hey, look, they got screwed out of wins against the Chiefs. I am not gonna lie about that. They got screwed out. They got screwed against the Chiefs. They got screwed a couple of times. And so that is absolutely just truthful. They should have won those games. But they got, especially Josh Allen, he got outdueled by Bo Nix, who's still a rookie. Remember that. A rookie. And this dude outdueled him. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. Like the fact that Josh Allen got outdueled by freaking Bo Nix. Says a lot right there. And it led to the firing of Sean McDermott. Like the Buffalo Bills are blowing this up. Now, here's the funny thing. I think the Buffalo Bills fired the wrong guy. If you ask me, I think they fired the wrong guy. Like, I don't think he was worth firing. Like, Sean McDermott really did keep that Buffalo Bills, and I get it. He hasn't won. Like, he's gotten all the way to the AFC title game, but still didn't make the Super Bowl. Still didn't beat the Kansas City Chiefs. But then there's one game against the Broncos where you're expected to do better. This is a team you should be, and you lose. I get that, but I don't think they should have fired him right then and there. Unless he was pretty much losing the locker room. Unless where the locker room just wasn't listening to him no more. Unless that was happening, I could see why they would fire him. But I really do believe they fired the wrong guy, which, again, that ain't smart on their move. It's not. It's really not. That was not smart. That was not smart. But also in other news too, we also found out that the Miami Dolphins have a new head coach. Former Ohio State defensive coordinator, former Boston College head coach, and former Green Bay Packers defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley, has accepted the Miami head coaching position. Which this is good, you could say, for Miami. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. This has been big, as we all know. And if you guys haven't already heard, then I mean, let's be realistic. This has been a big kind of blow up, and the fact that all this happened in a span in just a couple hours, and I was gonna make videos, but I decided to just wait till after the national title game. This is some huge news on their part. Really, it is. This is huge because for this to be happening, it says a lot. Really, it really does. Now, I will say for a lot of these teams, such as like the 49ers, who lost their D coordinator, for the Green Bay Packers, who lost their D coordinator as well, who will step in as the defensive coordinator for both of them? That is the question. Now, we don't know who yet, but that is a question that is out there. It is. Now, there is one more set of news. There's some more set of news as well because Brian Dable, who we all thought could have been a guy that Ohio State might try to get, him, Brian Dable, and Josh Grizzard, the OC for the Buccaneers, has been interviewed by the Eagles for the OC job. For OC. So the fact that the Eagles are looking for a new OC, they have fired their previous OC and is looking for a new one. This is actually something else entirely. Like the moving of coaches is crazy in the NFL right now. I'm not even gonna lie. It has been insane. Now, and as so I don't know what to think about any of this. As a matter of fact, there actually is more as well. Is about the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings get good and bad news regarding Brian Flores, given the Steelers' interest. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, as we all know, like I figured because Brian Flores is a very good defensive minded coach. He's an excellent D coordinator. There ain't no if or ands or buts about that. But according to this article, go. This would be Flores' second interview for the job in Pittsburgh. Now, from what Schefter has said about the Vikings' position in this article, he says that the Minnesota Vikings have a very good chance to bring Flores back if he doesn't land a head coaching gig elsewhere. Minnesota has been pushing to bring back Flores, and if he doesn't land a head coaching job, he would have a great chance of retaining him. But the bad news, as we all know, is that the Steelers, who are looking for a new head coach, are indeed after Brian Flores, which isn't surprising in all fairness because they do need a new head coach. Now, if anything, since Mike Tomlin stepped away. So, and bringing him in would be the smart thing for them. And I'm not gonna lie, to be honest, it has been a very crazy set of weeks regarding football. Now, there is more news regarding the portal, but I'm not going to cover that now. I'm going to cover that in my next episode as well. I want to thank you guys for tuning in here, and more importantly, to keep rolling with me here. If anything, I actually have a very good big news too, because I did plan on having Sean come to the Spectrum podcast with me to interview somebody, because I've been telling Eric, I've been telling everybody that I have a special guest that I've been wanting to bring on, someone who is a very who is actually a very smart young man, if anything. Uh I would tell you guys right now that the person I'm planning to bring on, he's basically the male version of me, except he's much more calmer than I am. For those of you who are part of the OHL podcast, you know how crazy and how fiery TG can get. Except you don't know it fully, because like I told you guys, on the Asylum segment, if I got something to lash out and you see crazy TG, you're going to see real crazy TG, because I can go off like no tomorrow. Trust me, you guys would not. Trust me, you guys would want to tune in to Patreon if I ever do that. If I ever decide to jump in to the Asylum and I decide to go off on people, I just decide to have that moment, you're going to want to tune in to see that, because I'm really finna be going off. Trust me, you're going to see crazy TG at its fullest. I'm gonna try to keep my language in check, but I'm probably not gonna be able to do. I'm not gonna do it successfully, most likely. I'm gonna just be honest. However, this is somebody I plan to bring on, and like I said, all the stuff that we plan to talk about, which would be the transporter news, everything, the regulations regarding NIL, and even my ideas regarding coaching. I do want to talk about it with this guy. He's a very interesting young man, someone that I believe Eric himself, the man behind the OHL podcast and the man who helped me create the Spectrum podcast, would be very interested in bringing on as a member of the OHL podcast. If, and I mean when I say this, if we ever decide to have more expansion, if we ever do more expansion, which I believe we will, I think we'll expand a little more. If we ever decide to do some more expansion, he needs an extra body, this is somebody he might want to have. And if he's interested, he could even come on my podcast more times than not, where it'd be me and him talking sports. Trust me, you guys are going to love him. Like I said, he's just like me, just more calmer. But every bit as intelligent when it comes to sports. So trust me. And, what's funny is he's around my age. I say young man, but I'm around his age. He's literally a year younger than me. But I promise you guys are going to absolutely love him. I can promise you that. Keep an eye out for that video for the next episode. And I can guarantee you guys are going to enjoy it. So let me close this thing out by saying thank you all for tuning into the Spectrum podcast related to all the news, all the everything regarding sports, regarding football, basketball, college, and NBA. When you guys, as well as the NFL, by the way, when you guys choose to tune in, make sure you guys hit that like, share, and subscribe. Turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. Send this out to your friends and family to help this podcast, this show of the Spectrum Show grow, so you guys can continue to get more content like this, and maybe even get some guests every now and again. I would tell you guys straight up that you guys are gonna absolutely enjoy the Spectrum podcast. I am gotta say thank you, Eric, for this great opportunity. Thank you for giving me this opportunity as part of the OHL podcast, and for helping me to create my own show. I appreciate you, man, and thank you for everything you've done, you and Chris. And shout out to the OHL podcast family. Shout out to everybody, Chris, Bart. I'm telling you right now, man, get me a Spectrum podcast shirt, hoodie. Make it happen, buddy, because I got some people who can't wait for that merch to come out. Make it happen, Bart. Shouting you out though, and shout out to my former co-hosts and Sean and Mika of the Buckeye Lounge and ladies. Well, like I told you guys, the Buckeye Lounge will be making this transition to Patreon. It will. You guys will see us on Patreon, but it won't be as frequent. And you guys will see us. And like I said, you will have Mika and myself every now and again guest starring on each other's podcast show when it continues to take off. But I promise you guys are going to enjoy every single second of what you have here in the Spectrum podcast. So I'm going to tune you guys out. And I can't wait to see you guys on the next show. Peace, everybody.